still not open. I've joined you from outside IDES offices like this one for almost a year now. They've been closed that entire time. And at this point, experts say their closures are only hurting those who are already hurting most.
Right now, at this time with the pandemic going on, it's hard for a lot of people out here.
LaTanya Willis is one of them. She says she needs in-person help because she couldn't finalize or file her claims appeal online. That's why, after waiting and waiting on a call, she drove to an office like this one, only to find it closed.
Don't just have us out in the dark.
The appeal she tried to file, the appeal she says she physically handed to a security guard outside the office, something IDES does not advise, never made it into the system. And by the time she got the callback she was promised, she missed the due date, now stuck back at square one.
If the office was open, I wouldn't be in this spot right now, this situation.
Those are the types of cases that are happening all over the state, just in terms of access to those offices.
Enter Jeremy Rosen with the Shriver Center on Poverty Law.
People are turning our way, and we don't actually handle these cases directly.
They're involved now because at this point, the closures are hurting communities already hit the hardest by the pandemic.
We think the people who are most being hurt are low-wage workers, members of the Black community, members of the Latinx community, people who are struggling the most.
His voice now joining others on a state level, asking IDES to find a way to safely reopen their doors, like the Secretary of State's office and the Department of Human Services. So we asked IDES about that again, and again their spokesperson did not provide a possible reopening date, citing safety concerns as a main reason they're still closed because of very credible threats they have received, adding that opening local offices would only make callback times longer and create long lines outside. A line, she says, would be better than nothing.
Open them up so they can do what they have to do for us.
I asked that IDES spokesperson if there are any plans in place to address those safety concerns so offices like this one can open again. I was only told they'll open as soon as they're able. We got 30 virtual minutes with Acting Director Kristen Richards. Not enough time to address the hundreds of issues we've investigated since the bottom of the job market fell out a year ago, but enough time to get answers to some of the questions IDES hasn't answered on issues that are affecting so many of you. A year into the pandemic that caused millions in Illinois to lose their jobs, many then forced to wait weeks and weeks on help just to try to secure benefits they're entitled to. What's being done to fix this? Richards told me the call center is the major priority for IDES right now.
We're viewing everything now through the lens of how do we increase that productivity.
Our latest public records request shows there were 100,920 phone numbers sitting in IDES's queues, people waiting for a returned call, a lifeline to their benefits. She says that number is down to just over 100,000 now. For the first time, we did get an answer to another question. Why can't IDES open its offices?
We are going to open our office as soon as it's feasible for us to do so.
The timeline right now, Richard says later this summer, with plans to test out in-person service at locations before fully opening their doors.
But we want to ensure that we are not creating a chaotic, unsafe environment for claimants that are visiting our offices. So we are going to do it gradually.
I've lost my home, I've lost my vehicle, I'm behind thousands of dollars in child support.
Now staying with a friend out of state, Jeremiah Lovelace met us virtually today to talk about the promised returned call from IDES that never came.
He said, I promise you, myself personally, will call you back tomorrow at 11 a.m. After it's all updated, and I'll get you your back pay and we'll get this rolling again.
He says that broken promise is what left him in this position.
I waited that entire day, 11 a.m., 12 p.m., on and on throughout the afternoon. Never got a call back and haven't gotten one since.
Out of options, out of savings, and still waiting. When he says the whole reason for the call, the continued hold on his benefits, was simple.
And then all I wanted to do was update my information in the system. Like
his address and banking information. He says the online system alerted him to call IDES to finalize those changes and his claim. He put his number in their callback system and waited a month on the call where he was promised a callback. He's waited another 3 weeks since, with his number back in that system, waiting.
Quite frankly, it's unacceptable.
If it was the other way around and it was them losing their money, they would definitely want those offices open.
Perry Turner is one of dozens of unemployment claimants we've heard from, calling for unemployment offices to unlock their doors and open up again. It's been more than a year since they first closed to the public because of the pandemic. But with no timeline set, no date on the books, and the spokesperson for IDES telling us the same thing Acting Director Kristen Richards did back in March. Why can't IDES open its offices?
We are going to open our office as soon as it's feasible for us to do so.
We took the question to the top today.
You know, the pandemic isn't over.
Asking Governor J.B. Pritzker why they aren't open and when they'll join the public offices already open.
There have been literally physical threats that have been brought upon the people who work in IDS.
Governor Pritzker says they're working directly with security advisors and state police to come up with a safe reopening plan.
And so we want to make sure that people who are working there and people who want to come into the government offices to talk to the workers there, that everything is done in as safe manner as possible.
But when it comes to specifics on those threats he mentioned, and IDES has mentioned to us for months, we don't have a lot of information because no one at the state level has shared it. We know about one incident on record at an office in Springfield more than a year ago, at the onset of the pandemic. I had to make a public records request for this. A report from Springfield Police on April 10th, 2020, detailing $1,300 in damage to an IDES building, where people, quote, broke out the glass of the front door, and, quote, both the front and back doors were spray painted.
It's just like a big black hole. You have no response.
A big black hole Myra Miller says she's been stuck in for months, waiting for help from the state's unemployment office.
It's been going on for so long, you would have thought by now they would have learned how to handle it better.
She worked at a construction company for more than a decade before the pandemic and had to clear a claim a fraudster filed in her name before she could make her own. But still, months later, no money, no help, no call.
I promised call after call after call. I never got a call back.
We know she's not alone. Check this out. We took the most recent number of phone numbers in the state system, waiting for calls from the state for help, and plotted them out. Look at the steady spike. Numbers at their lowest in mid-June, and then on the up and up through the end of July, when more than 32,000 phone numbers were tied up in the system, waiting. Jeremy Rosen is Director of Economic Justice for the Shriver Center on Poverty Law.
Absolutely. It doesn't surprise me at all that there's a real crunch going on right now in terms of increased demand for services from IDES.
With unemployment claims still at a high, he says this shows people need help and they're not getting it.
Unemployment is that rock, that thing that just needs to be there for people who lose their jobs.
We look to the historical data to see how claims stack up now, plugging the numbers into a graph for some perspective. Let's start with 2019. Pre-pandemic, in 1 week in July, just over 10,300 people filed for unemployment. Pretty standard for that year. Last year, in the heart of the pandemic, that soared to over 33,000 people filing for unemployment that same week. And while the most recent numbers, just released by the state, are much lower than that, nearly 19,000 last week, you can see they're still up significantly from pre-pandemic times. What this says to an expert?
We need to get those offices reopened, and it needs to happen as quickly as possible.
Myra Miller agrees.
I think they're failing people. I think that there are a lot of people who probably hadn't gotten any resolution at all, or they don't know where to turn to.
When we say we're working for Chicago, here's one more example of what we mean. For weeks, we've been taking your questions about why Illinois unemployment offices still haven't fully reopened to the public. The in-person appointments now available at some locations just aren't going to get the job done. Now, CBS 2's Tara Molina is uncovering answers even your state reps aren't getting.
It took us more than 60 public records requests and months of digging, but for the first time, we now know the reasons IDES has given publicly for keeping its offices closed. They don't tell the full story.
Yeah, this is security. I got the plate number of the car. It had a lady threaten to blow up the building.
A bomb threat.
They took us out of the parking lot and then they went down Elm towards Jefferson.
Just one example of threats made to the Illinois Department of Employment Security in the last year and a half. With doors to this office and others locked for 17 months, while 4 million people lost their jobs.
It was really hard. It's the first time I've ever been laid off.
Laid off this spring.
Welcome to the Illinois Department of Employment Security.
She's called dozens of times for help with her unemployment claim.
When you're on the phone, you're hoping it's being handled, and then 2 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by, 6 weeks go by, and it's still, nothing's been done.
It's fall, and Lori Sperano still hasn't seen a dime.
My husband is on a pension. If he didn't have, a little part-time job, I would have lost my house.
So many with everything on the line. Why are the offices they rely on still closed?
There have been literally physical threats that have been brought upon the people who work in IDS.
What kinds of threats? Where? We asked over and over. State leaders wouldn't answer, citing pending investigations. So we filed dozens of public records requests with police departments across the state and IDES itself. That's how we uncovered what's really been happening inside and outside these walls.
Got the plate number of the car. It had a lady threaten to blow up the building.
Remember that bomb threat in Peoria? We learned about it while analyzing hundreds of police records, finding it's one of more than 50 security incidents at IDES offices in the last year and a half. The first, April of last year, shattered glass and graffiti at the Springfield office, back when 140,000 people filed for unemployment in a week alone. Fast forward, Ottawa, September 2020. Threats so serious, IDES sent this warning letter to a man threatening staff on the phone. He said he had nothing to lose. And this year, more bomb threats, people banging on doors, refusing to leave. Responding to security issues, let alone during a pandemic, difficult.
We're in unprecedented times right now.
But threats like these,
when you look,
not new to this former police chief with 3 decades on the force.
People are emotional and they're frustrated because these are resources that the public is expecting. And when people are denied those resources, then, it's understandable that people are emotional.
She says it's an agency's responsibility to come up with a plan, one that balances safety and serving the public. That's what other states did. Oklahoma and Mississippi told us they never had any security incidents. They fully reopened.
You're perpetuating the problem when you're withholding services. And so there has to be the sweet spot, that balance between providing those services and keeping people safe.
So what was happening inside IDES? While the agency said they were closed for security concerns, internal emails raised questions about how well they were really keeping track. I don't believe this to be exhaustive. That's what the acting director said about incidents sent her way in December. That list showing just 8 incidents from April to October of 2020. But our analysis found at least 20 by that time.
Do you think that every incident was reported?
I know that not every incident was reported.
Their incident, a physical altercation in the parking lot.
It was very frightening.
This from an IDES employee who agreed to talk to us under the condition of anonymity.
An individual did block my way from leaving the office. They did physically stop me from leaving.
When we asked an agency spokesperson why some incidents were missing from IDES's list, she didn't respond.
You have to analyze the problem before you can devise a response, an action. And so it is of the utmost importance that you collect the data.
We're not the only ones who aren't getting answers.
This is definitely my first time seeing any documented reports.
State Representative Joe Sosnowski contacted IDES countless times with no answers before filing this formal resolution in May, calling for offices to reopen. It passed unanimously with bipartisan support. But emails from that same month show IDES was still trying to figure out its plans, with an IDES staffer making efforts to keep those plans quiet, writing, "They're interested in talking to states who've done this on the DL, the down low."
Public agency, paid for by the taxpayer dollars, in a representative democracy, and they want to not share plans with anybody. I mean, it's just unfathomable.
For the most part, now, doors remain closed to desperate taxpayers.
They're losing everything they have.
And to transparency, your right to know.
Please open your offices.
We requested an interview with the acting director of IDES for this story. No response to that request, no answers to the specific questions we sent their way. But they did reiterate that 18 of their offices are now open for in-person appointments. For CBS 2, I'm Tara Molina.